Good morning, everybody. I'm Bert Jackson, CEO of the Cape Cod Technology Council. Welcome to our coffee Q&A for Friday, November 13th. We do these coffee Q&As every Friday that we don't have our first Friday event, and or if there's a holiday coming up, and we've got a few of those coming up pretty soon. So next week we have Anna Nukas and Rennie Friedman from Sol Systems. They are a solar investment company. They invest in solar projects. Locally, they've worked on the solar project that's happening at the Barnstable Fairgrounds. So that should be a fun chat. Then we've got our Thanksgiving break, and our first Friday in December is Dr. Tom Davenport. And Tom is an expert on AI. He teaches it at Babson College, and he's a recognized expert around the world. In fact, he has his own Wikipedia page. So we're looking forward to our first Friday with him. We've got some excellent coffee Q&As in December, and you can check our website as we update that for more information. So if you're so inclined, feel free to drop your name in the chat and say hello. Drop some questions in the chat. This is a casual conversation, so Robin is going to be our moderator, and Robin Orbison from Cape Space, also our program director for the Cape Cod Technology Council. Sorry. Isn't there something about putting your phones on mute? So Robin, why don't you take it away?
Okay, thank you, Bert. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Friday Coffee Q&A series. Everybody's making comments about Friday the 13th. I would like to also point out that November 13th is a day of note because it is the day that Felix Unger was asked to remove himself from his place of residence. Okay, so now I've had my joke. All right, so we are really excited this morning to welcome Dr. Jane Ward, who is a Tech Council member, and she is many things. She is a retired Air Force colonel. She is an optometrist. She is a public health expert. She is a solar energy advocate, and she is recently become a advocate for businesses and organizations understanding the importance of indoor air quality now that we have experienced a pandemic. So we're very excited to welcome Dr. Jane Ward. Good morning, Jane.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Okay, so Jane, let's start off just getting to know you a little bit. If you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about how you are many things that many people may think don't necessarily go together. So can you just talk a little bit about how you came to join the Air Force, how you chose optometry as a specialty, and how that led you to your enthusiasm and advocacy in these public health matters?
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I probably can blame both optometry and the Air Force on meeting my husband, who was my future husband, when we were both in college in the Boston area. And this was in the 70s. He had a fairly low number in the Vietnam draft and had taken advantage of Air Force ROTC to get some more college under his belt before he went into military service. So when we decided that we were going to do the rest of our life together, we actually got married here in Centerville in 1972, just before his senior year in college. And I was a biology major. He was heading to optometry school, and it looked interesting to me. I didn't really know about optometry until I met Steve. And so we both went from undergraduate school in Boston to optometry school at UC Berkeley, which was a fantastic experience. And I also was able to get an Air Force scholarship. So we came in to the military on active duty in '77 and did optometry for a couple of years, and then had the opportunity to go to medical school. The military medical school, you may or may not know about, is on the campus of the now Walter Reed National Medical Center across the street from NIH. It became our military medical essentially academy with a first class graduating in, let's see, 80, I believe. Our class was the class of 83. We were the fourth class. And the idea was to train career military medical leaders. We figured we would go to the school, get a little more training, pay back our obligation, and get out and go into private practice. And every time we thought we'd get out of the military, they offered us another very interesting opportunity. So we trained beyond optometry, became physicians, went into ophthalmology, and then went to the Philippines and Germany and Texas and the Pentagon. But along the way, the military, no matter what your specialty, is very interested in public health, preventive medicine. No matter what specialty you practice preventive medicine as well, in at least in an informal way. And after I completed my Air Force career, I had never able to take a master's in public health during my time on active duty. And so I went back to school, trained in public health, but I was interested in how does the built environment impact public health? And so that's how I got into the focus on environmental health and how air quality impacts health.
You know, it's interesting. I don't know if there's a correlation here, but a few weeks ago, we had another ophthalmologist on. We had a gentleman named Dr. Thomas Fredo, and he has become a consultant to the industry that is manufacturing remote thermal devices.
Yes.
It has apparently been determined that the best part of the body on which to get an accurate core temperature reading is just inside the eye. And so there is another example of how optometry is very connected to the public health issues we're facing today that most people really would not have ever put together.
Well, actually, Tom and Steve and I were all at UC Berkeley together. It was
Okay.
funny. And I hadn't seen him other than noticing that he was coming here on the first Friday. I haven't seen him in person for quite a few decades, but he was a graduate student when we were in the professional optometry track. So that was really interesting. And he went on to be also certified in ophthalmic pathology and to be dean of an optometry school up in Toronto. So really interesting to run back into Tom again, at least online.
Okay, so his ophthalmology specialty led him to the thermal measuring aspect of all of the pandemic challenges. Yours has led you more to air quality in the built environment. So can you give us indoor air quality 101?
Well, most people don't pay much attention. None of us really pay much attention to indoor air quality unless we have a problem with it. If anyone has had a mold problem in a building they've lived in, which many of us have either on the Cape or other places where moisture around us is an issue, as well as building leaks, and you've had to deal with mold, you can appreciate problems with indoor air quality. Most people don't realize, though, that even under normal conditions, 90% of us in the United States spend 90% of our time indoors. And indoor air quality, even in normal situations, is estimated to be at least 5 times as unhealthy as outdoor air in your area. So if you're in an area like we are on Cape Cod, or in another area where you get a lot of, you don't have a lot of industry or traffic, and you have a lot of wind, you tend to have really good outdoor air. But as long as you spend your time indoor and keep your windows closed, and you're worried about temperature, either heating or cooling, and you're rebreathing the same air, and you may be cooking with a gas stove, or you may have fabrics in your home, or personal care products that are off gassing, your indoor air is getting less and less healthy. You need that circulation exchange with outdoor air. And it's interesting to me that actually back in 1989, there was a special committee in Massachusetts advising the Massachusetts state government at the time. They felt that committee's results found that up to 50% of all illnesses, not just respiratory, but all illnesses may be triggered by poor indoor air quality. The reason that happens is it can make your body, put your physiology in an inflammatory prone state so that it doesn't take much of an additional trigger to make you sick. And in the time of a pandemic, when people are staying home, and maybe more people are staying home together in an indoor space, our indoor air quality in our homes is getting less and less healthy. And when buildings have been closed for a while, they can be prone to all sorts of problems from not having the ventilation systems going, not having the ventilation systems maintained. And when people go back into buildings that may have been closed for several months, they are at risk for problems from indoor air quality, either mold, Legionella, all sorts of other things. And then if somebody happens to be in the building sharing a respiratory virus, which the COVID-19 virus is, it can be a significant opportunity to spread the virus. Probably most people have heard that crowded gatherings indoors is a much less healthy situation for us right now in the pandemic than outdoor activities where we can be far apart and have plenty of circulation and fresh air.
So can you, let's take the home first. What can people do? What should people be doing to be aware of the quality of their indoor air and improve it if they need to?
Well, it's a little bit hard to be really aware of exactly where you stand unless you bother to get some kind of an indoor air monitor. A very relatively inexpensive monitor for $100 plus or minus can be purchased on Amazon, where you can look at temperature, relative humidity, and indoor concentration of carbon dioxide. We all exhale a higher percentage of carbon dioxide than we bring in. And if your indoor air has the carbon dioxide parts per million of in the 400 to 1,000 range, you're probably getting pretty good circulation in terms of bringing in refreshing with outside air. Some people may be aware of that the target to get back to for outside carbon dioxide to mitigate or turn back climate change is 350 parts per million. There's an organization called 350. But the outdoor air most of the time now measures in the low 400s. So if you can get your indoor air in the 400 to 1,000 parts per million range, you're probably getting good recirculation. Other things to consider are what type of ventilation system do you have? If you have a central HVAC system, heating, ventilation, air conditioning system with ductwork, you probably have filters that need to be changed periodically. The first step is to make sure that system is working properly, is being maintained at the appropriate intervals, the filters are being cleaned, and it's set on not on recirculate, but on bringing in outdoor air. If you have some of the popular mini splits that are getting more and more popular on the Cape, you may have to use other techniques to refresh your indoor air. For example, run your exhaust fans longer than you may ordinarily, either over your stove or in your bathrooms, and have a window cracked somewhere depending on what the temperature is outdoors to pull in outdoor air. So the first step is increase ventilation. The second step is to make sure that your air is properly filtered if you do have filters in your system. And then the next step to think about is to consider purifying your air, either with a room purifier that may have a UV light in it, or it may have a hydrogen peroxide generating capability, or have UV lights somewhere in your HVAC system. We have a mini split system upstairs that has a small amount of ductwork connecting 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. And it has near the near the output and the fan, it has a UVC light, a germicidal UV light that will sterilize the air essentially as it goes by before it gets spread into the upstairs bedroom and bathroom. The UV lights are not very expensive. This has been proven to kill microbes since the time of Pasteur in 1877 and has been used extensively in water purification and air cleaning for the last several decades.
So, so I think that there's a lot of confusion out there about some of these products, and about whether it makes any sense for somebody to do one without the other. So in other words, if I go out and buy an air purifier at Amazon and I stick it in my living room, I guess there's some thought that you've covered yourself, right? But if you haven't addressed your HVAC system, that air purifier may not be able to do its job. So can you just address how these things interact, and is there a hierarchy of what's more important and what you would start with and then build on?
I think, again, some of it's personal preference. Some of it has to do with what type of building are you talking about? Are you talking about a home or a small office, or are you talking about a commercial building that has a specified requirement for clean air? For example, the high-end air purification happens in hospitals, in clean manufacturing situations that are, say, manufacturing electronics, or in pharmaceutical and similar manufacturing situations. They want clean rooms that are so clean that you can measure the particles in the air by a particle counter that may go off only every few seconds. And this is a little bit analogous to what do you tell people when you're talking to people about how to mitigate climate change from an individual level. Some of it depends on your budget and your preferences, and some of it depends on what motivates you to do more. I'm a huge advocate for solar PV. That's not the low-hanging fruit when you come to mitigating climate change. In general, insulating your home and changing out your light bulbs to more efficient light bulbs is the low-hanging fruit. In terms of making a parallel set of recommendations for air quality, the low-hanging fruit is basically fresh air and sunshine. Make your indoor environment as close to an outdoor environment that has fresh air and sunshine as you can. So depending on your budget, again, you can open windows. You can just run a simple room fan to help with the air changes. And the idea of sunlight is, if you have a southern exposure, bring in the sunshine. UV light, whether it's sunshine or a UV bulb, kills these organisms within a fraction of a second. So depending on, again, the type of building you have, your budget, your requirements for how clean do you need to be, how many people are you wanting to get together, you start with what may be the low-hanging fruit for your given situation. In terms of an air purifier, I think you're wasting your money if you don't verify that your HVAC system is clean and operating at its best capability. The filters are clean. If there's a possibility to put a UV light in it, put a UV light in it. If it's not a central system, then you have to kind of back off and think about one room at a time. But if you get a air purifier, there are some very good ones on the market. I'm not connected to any of these companies, but what I recommended for my daughter, who lived in California and was in the midst of all this fire, was to purchase one that both the Sierra Club and Consumer Reports had recommended as a good unit for both particles as well as smoke, as well as volatile organic compounds. And I think the one she got, she has a fairly small house, I think it was in the order of $600 to $800. Whenever possible, I'm a huge fan of the UV light. I think that has been, as I said, discovered in the 1870s, proven to kill microbes in the 1930s, and has been used extensively in these high requirement room cleaning situations in industry, in hospitals, in food handling, in water purification. So if possible, get a UV light somewhere in your system. Now, you don't want a UV light that you are exposed to directly with your vision, because the common killing wavelength is 254 nanometers. And that is actually dangerous to our eyes. That can contribute to cataracts, can contribute to macular degeneration. So when you may have noticed, they have what they call, it's basically high up along the ceiling UV lights at the Cape Cod Hospital. That cleans the air as it gets recirculated in the hallways and it goes past the lights, but it's not in a position where it's going to shine in the eyes of the people walking down the hallway below it. So, you know, I'm a huge fan of UV light. Another very interesting technology that I didn't know about until this last few months, where I've been researching the different ways to clean indoor air, is actually a generator that makes gaseous hydrogen peroxide at a very safe level, 1/50th of the maximum level considered safe by OSHA and National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. 0.02 parts per million hydrogen peroxide is generated from the moisture and the oxygen in the air. It makes charged particles of hydrogen peroxide, which is H2O2, 2 hydrogens, 2 oxygens. They have a charge in them. And they essentially, I mean, the way I think about it is that they're almost like mini drones. They go around and actually seek out other particles that are suspended in the air. And if they happen to be virus, bacteria, or mold, they incapacitate them so they can't be infectious, they can't replicate. It's unbelievable to me. And then there's no dangerous chemical output when this is done, because it's a very low level of hydrogen peroxide, which is safe. There's actually hydrogen peroxide generated in the outdoor air during lightning and thunderstorms. Sometimes you notice an unusual, somewhat clean smell after a thunderstorm. That's hydrogen peroxide that's been generated from the lightning strike. So anyway, these units can be put in cars, in small rooms, in big rooms, and they're another layer of protection.
Wow, Jane, okay, I'm going to stop you there. We got questions flying in. This is a lot of information. I am going to ask Jen, who is standing by, if she can help us sort through and relate some of the questions that are coming in. So let's just take about a 5 or 10 minute question break here. Jen?
Sure. So I know it seems like there's a lot of conversation about the indoor air purifiers. It seems like that's been covered fairly in depth, but feel free if we're missing something, go ahead and put that back in the chat. One question I think all of us have had, you know, since the pandemic started, I know this has come up for me, Steve Tom asked, you know, how do we handle having someone come into our home right now, like a plumber? You know, we both have masks on, we're keeping the doors open. You know, what are your thoughts on that around having, you know, a worker or anything done in your home? You know, is it safe if everyone's being mask compliant? You know, what's your thoughts on that?
I think the 2 criteria that you just mentioned are probably good for keeping us safe. Keep the windows open. If you have fans to run so that your or exhaust fans or window fans that you can run while they're there. If they're wearing a mask, neither party has had any symptoms or any exposure to somebody with a known case. The darned virus is so sneaky. This is a very difficult virus to get a handle on. It's much harder than the earlier SARS virus that came out of Hong Kong in the early 2000s, because there's a delay between when you're exposed and become infectious and when you show symptoms. So the person who is infectious doesn't necessarily know they're at risk of spreading it. And that can be up to 45% of people. Some people will test positive and never be symptomatic. They'll go through a whole course and it'll be so mild it's asymptomatic. So that's the real tricky thing. But given that, one layer of defense, if you will, is to have both parties, you know, go through their checklist that they haven't been exposed to somebody who's positive, who's a patient. They don't have any symptoms. You're both wearing masks and you have airflow. And we didn't have anyone in our house, I think, probably for the first 4 or 5 months of this pandemic. And I didn't even go to the grocery store. I was just so afraid because the virus, the illness can be so devastating and it's so unpredictable that you do not want to get this virus. Absolutely. No matter who you are, no matter how healthy you think you are. So I think what you described though is good precautions and reasonable.
So I'm guessing we're not coming to your house for Thanksgiving. Uh-oh, did she freeze?
Well, you know,
Oh, no.
we have an interesting situation here. We actually have daughters visiting, and that is, you know, not recommended. Dr. Fauci has made a big point of saying how he and his wife and their 3 daughters are going to be having a Zoom Thanksgiving dinner. But our daughters actually left California and Alaska. They tested and had negative test results before they left. The daughter from Alaska flew wearing a mask the whole time. They tested again. They were driving cross country and camping. They didn't go in any buildings other than, you know, stopping to get gas. They camped in a camper. They had their food with them. Anytime they were near anyone else, they wore masks. They tested again in Nebraska. They just got those negative test results this morning, and they're waiting for another test that they took when they got here Wednesday night. They went to Shaw's in Harwichport, and they got a quick turnaround test that they should have the results of today. But in the meantime, we have our windows open. We're running fans. We're running 2 air purifiers, and I think I have my mask around my neck. If we come in the same room, we're all wearing masks. So, you know, and they're not symptomatic. And we really agonized over this. Was this being too cavalier or not? But definitely shouldn't be having a big gathering at Thanksgiving. And if you do get together with people, go through that fairly painful series of checks before you spend time together. But our house is pretty cold because we got all the windows open right now.
Another question just from Mark. Sorry, then Robin, I'll turn it over to you. Quick question is, are N95/KN95 worth it around strangers or in close quarters with others?
Yes. Yep. And I'm not an expert on masks. There's been a lot coming out, and actually one of the exciting things on the horizon is masks that may be available in the next month or so that are going to be embedded with some substance, whether it's copper or something, that will purify air as it goes in and, you know, kill viruses as they hit the mask and purify your exhalation as you breathe out. So look for masks with incredible capabilities coming soon. But yes, you want that N95. This is not an N95, so I'm not really showcasing the best mask, but you want that tight fit, and especially if you're doing something like flying on a plane or you're in close quarters with strangers for a period of time. But yes, I would say, or if you have any, particularly high risk conditions, I would say use it. My husband uses it all the time. That's his mask of choice because he has enough medical issues that he's even more nervous about not getting this.
Jane, I'm gonna shift gears a little bit here, but you gave us a good segue when you started talking about Thanksgiving, or maybe it was Jen who brought up Thanksgiving. And so Thanksgiving is traditionally the biggest travel weekend in the country, right? So could you comment a little bit about airplanes? Because I have heard people say they will never get on an airplane because it's really scary. And I know the airlines are, experiencing some difficulty because of low ridership. But I've also heard people get on airplanes and say, oh, it's no big deal. The airplanes are really safe because they recycle the air constantly. I think there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about this. So can you comment?
I can comment, and I'll tell you, this is my opinion. There are 2 good air quality professionals, scientists. One is Joseph Allen at Harvard School of Public Health, and the other one is Lindsay Marr, M-A-R-R, at Virginia Tech. Both of them have given interviews. They've both written op-eds. They're both involved with the groups of scientists that have challenged World Health and CDC to talk more about indoor air quality and their recommendations. They're both a lot younger than I am, and they don't have the health issues in the family that we do. And so they're a little bit more, it's okay to fly if you wear your mask all the time. The HEPA, most aircraft have HEPA filters. They don't have UV lights. They don't have hydrogen peroxide. They recirculate the air. And definitely the way we got this virus spread all over the world is from air travel. So clearly the virus spreads by air travel. I'm 69 and a half, and both my husband and I have issues. We do not want this virus. We're not sure we would survive this virus. So I'm extremely cautious. My last boss in the Air Force was the Air Force Surgeon General. He advises airlines on what to do about the pandemic in terms of their air quality. He has advised them to add UV lights to their air recirculating system and add these hydrogen peroxide air purifiers that actively clean the air while people are in the space. The airlines, to my knowledge, have not done that yet. And I think they're cutting corners. And I think they're silly to do that because these two additional strategies are not very expensive for considering saving lives and rebuilding their business. So I'm personally not flying until I have a vaccine and until I hear that the aircraft I get in has a HEPA filter and a UV light and hopefully something like a hydrogen peroxide ionizer. But I am very conservative. I have heard both Lindsay Marr and Joseph Allen talk about flying. I'm sure they're at least 20 years younger than I am and probably healthy. So frankly, you can't, I don't trust the airlines. I would go, instead of going to the airlines, I would go to the airline attendant unions. The pilots and the airline attendants have their own higher risk, higher threshold for cleaning air. They haven't met my criteria yet. And frankly, they haven't met my Air Force boss criteria yet. These are not difficult fixes and they just haven't done it. And the other thing about the HEPA filters, they may have them in the aircraft, but they can disable them. It takes more fan power to push the air through a HEPA filter. So in order to save jet fuel, aircraft that have HEPA filters installed can bypass them and save fuel. So I tend to be very skeptical. If there's a way around safety to save fuel and make a few more bucks, you have to know each business owner and practitioner and decide how much you're going to trust them. But I don't plan to travel. My daughter who traveled is obviously a lot younger, healthier. She's pretty cautious, but she kept her N95 on the whole trip. But that's my opinion.
And that sounds like good advice to me. Question, if someone does have to travel on an airplane, and some people can't avoid it, right? They're family issues, they're business issues. If someone does have to travel on an airplane, is there anything that they can do to take extra precaution other than wear the mask? So particularly in the airport and security line process, and then on the plane itself, do you have any advice for protection?
I would say again, and the 6 feet, this idea of staying 6 feet away, that's just a ballpark number. That's not really based in science. If somebody has a high viral load, they're asymptomatic and they happen to speak loudly or, be standing next to you, you'd rather be 25 feet away. 6 feet is not magic, but stay as far away as you can from people. And some airports, in fact, I just read yesterday, Logan is one of the airports, where you can get a quick test before getting on the plane. I think some of the international airports, I think Heathrow and London and some others are testing people both leaving and arriving before you either get on the aircraft or before you depart. And there's actually a rating, a safety rating for airports. I haven't seen very many of the US airports that have had that, but I believe the airport in Rome was one of the first to get an air quality or a COVID safety rating to have put in place during the pandemic. So I would research your airline. I would research the airport. If there's any way to get on a plane that's requiring passengers to test before they can get on, that would be great. And then wear your mask the whole time.
Okay, great. I think I'm gonna go back over. It looks like some more questions are coming in, so I'm gonna go back over to Jen.
We have just a comment from Felicia about how incredibly sick her own sister has been. It seems like for months, for 9 months she's been sick. I assume with COVID, Felicia, is that correct?
Yeah, she traveled back from New Zealand the last week of February. She left a 14-hour flight to LAX and a 4-hour layover, and then to SeaTac and a 3-hour layover. She lives in Fairbanks, Alaska. She got home at 2 in the morning. A week and a half later, sick. She's very susceptible to respiratory illnesses. It was the very beginning of when everybody was saying this disease, and of course she's on the West Coast, etc. And I did text her when she was in LAX. I said, I don't know, you have a bandana or a sock or something you could just tie over your mouth and your nose while you're hanging in there. And she said, yeah, I'm working on it, but who knows? And yeah, she's been sick all that time. And she had a test when she first got ill. Well, it was probably a month and a half after she got ill, but up in Fairbanks, the test was one of those early ones that gave a lot of false readings and took 3 weeks to get results and all that stuff. And it was a nightmare, but she's finally, well, she told me the other day she was outside stacking her, working on her 5th quarter wood. So I assume she's getting stronger. She sounds better, but she had every symptom you could think of. She's on this big peer group online, a bunch of long haulers, et cetera, et cetera. Thank God she never had to go to the hospital because, I don't know, but she's had every part of this disease that you could have: rashes, lung pain, rib pain, back pain, fevers, just absolutely no energy. More fevers. She never had, thank God, her housemate has an oximeter, which they've been using. She never had an absence of oxygen, so that she never had an emergency in that. And believe it or not, she has a Korean herbalist up there who was making her body inhospitable to a virus. Don't ask me, fermented stuff, I guess, in a lot of it. Drinking a lot of apple cider vinegar, anything awful, just to make things not like her, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea if that worked or not. She says it did. Who knows?
Felicia, thank you. Thank you for sharing that and underscoring what Jane is saying, that this is a virus that we do not want to get. We've been living with it for close to a year now. It's ebbed and flowed, and we have I think all of us vacillate between extreme caution and more of a desire to, get a little more complacent and say, okay, it's under control, it's not that bad. And your story makes it very clear that it is that bad, and it's something that we don't want to get. Jane, I have a good question coming in here from Eldon, and it actually echoes some of the concerns that I personally have as the owner of a bricks and mortar business. I wouldn't quite phrase my question this way, but Eldon has said, what is your assessment of the capabilities of Cape Cod HVAC vendors to implement indoor air improvements? And I'll just add to that a little bit by saying that I've personally been researching this issue for my business, and I find that the HVAC vendors basically know about the HVAC part of it, and they want to sell you HVAC stuff. And if you talk to vendors who sell air purifiers, they just want to sell you air purifiers. And there's not a cohesive discussion of how these different things work in tangent with each other. So can you just talk a little bit about where do people go when they need advice on this? And do you think that we have the resources locally to help homeowners and businesses who need it?
Well, I have to say, my knowledge of that is a little bit incomplete other than what I've looked for myself. It was a little bit challenging to find a group that would put this UV light in our little mini ducted mini split thing. It wasn't something they did normally, and they had to research it. And it was just one of the, again, as you said, the installers. I have not yet made the connection, but I would like to, either with Joseph Allen, who is at the Harvard School of Public Health. His credentials are that he's an industrial hygienist who worked on remediating sick buildings, mostly from mold and other issues, for years before he went into academics. So he's a very hands-on guy. But anyway, industrial hygienist is one of the professional experts. And the other one would be a member of ASHRAE, which is the Association or the American Society of Refrigerating, Heating, and Air Conditioning Experts. There is a Boston chapter, and I have been negligent in not contacting them and asking them for a member from that chapter who would come to Cape Cod, because I honestly think we should do something as a business community, either as the Cape Cod reopening with the business community and with Senator Sear, or get our school districts together and actually have an air quality engineer or an industrial hygienist walk us through the evaluation. It may be that if they partnered with some of the installers, that then we could, fly on our own. But as to my knowledge, we don't have an ASHRAE member located on Cape Cod. And I think that's a real need. And I'm not an air quality engineer. I'm a public health person trying to keep people healthy, repeating, what I've learned about this, but I'm not the engineer. And so I feel like I need additional education and guidance in really advising people. But I agree with you. My experience has been, you talk to an HVAC installer and they're going to want to install their system, and they'll try to promote their particular high quality air filter or their humidification, dehumidification that can go with the system, or the air purification vendors will want to sell you their unit. So I think you have to be skeptical, and it might be worth, getting some sort of a group together, and even having, Lindsay Marr and Joseph Allen would both speak. They would be a First Friday speaker if we wanted them to. They're happy to speak to all sorts of groups. So that's a thought, but it is challenging. I think we are a little bit on our own when it comes to this decision making.
So Jane, I actually want to comment further on that, because I did contact ASHRAE after our initial conversation, and I was told that they are not able to recommend any specific business. That was the national ASHRAE, and they did refer me to the Boston chapter, who never responded to my inquiry.
Okay.
But you may have more, they may be more likely to respond to you than to some random small business owner from Cape Cod. So I do, we're getting comments in the chat, and I'm getting some text messages that sound like people are in support of possibly joining some forces here to bring, an expert, an industrial hygienist in, not just to speak, but maybe also to become a resource for Cape Cod property owners.
Well, I think Joseph Allen might be a great one to do that. He's a terrific speaker. and he's relatively local, and he's training other graduate students in this area. He knows public health trained, environmental health experts, as well as other industrial hygienists. So I'd be happy to go, chat with him and see if we couldn't get some sort of a opportunity for him to give us guidance. That would actually make me feel more comfortable that I'm really.
Well, I would be delighted for you and I to continue that conversation offline and see
Okay.
what we put together. So thank you. For the moment, we are coming up on 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock. We're going to start moving into a wrap up here. I do want to leave a few more minutes because there's so many questions for the audience. But there's just one little segue that I know you wanted to address. And I wanted to give you just a chance, a completely different topic, but I know that you are a very, very big advocate of solar energy. And I just wanted to give you a moment to say, your thoughts on the importance of solar. So do you want to comment on that?
Well, I am a big fan of solar. We've had solar in 3 homes in San Antonio, solar PV in Washington, D.C. and here. And for several reasons. I mean, it helps fight climate change. It helps, keep the air clean because we're not using coal and fossil fuels to generate our power. And, I think it's fighting climate change, which is going to be, once we get through this pandemic, that's our next huge challenge and emergency. And they're all linked together. If we're using solar or wind or geothermal and we're not using fossil fuels, we're keeping the air clean. We all share the same air. It's not my air, it's not your air. What I breathe out, you breathe in sooner or later. And so we need to keep the air clean for everybody, including ourselves. And solar is fantastic. I think it's been proven technology. Solar PV has been around, I believe, since the 70s. It's the best investment we have ever made as a household. We've been able to pay our systems back in terms of the upfront cost within a few years, and then we get an income. We get a savings on electricity plus an income. But this whole idea of keeping the air clean, we need to keep air clean, we need to keep water clean, and it's all linked together with mitigating climate change and supporting human health. So we have fantastic solar vendors on the Cape, and it's going to be great to hear from the upcoming speakers who are the financiers, because some people are limited by what they can do up front in terms of paying for it. But I am a huge advocate. I think that I think Edison back in the 1920s said, I hope we don't burn up all the fossil fuel before we get to using the power from the sun, because that's, we can't use that up, at least not in any of our lifetimes.
Okay, and so we're gonna do questions for the last few minutes here, and there's one here that sort of ties this together. Question here: does sunlight through windows still provide meaningful UV light?
So I think some of it, yes. It definitely provides heat. We all know that. It depends on what type of window you have, because there's all sorts of window coatings that have been designed to avoid UV, because you don't want your fabrics and all sorts of things to fade. The discovery back in the 1870s in Louis Pasteur's lab was through a window and through a test tube that the bacteria were killed. So there is some kill. I think it probably depends on the type of glass. If any of you have ever had glasses that darken when they're exposed to sunlight, sometimes they work inside a car and sometimes they don't. Sometimes you have to stick your glasses out the window to get the lenses to change to be sunglasses. But it depends on the particular coating on the window. There is some screening of UV with any glass, but it's not 100%.
Okay, and then another question here. Actually, this is a question from Mark. Mark, you've got a question in here about the ozone, and do you mind unmuting yourself and saying your question?
Yeah, is there a relationship between vaporous hydrogen peroxide and ozone?
These units don't create any measurable ozone, and that's a very important question because some of the air purifiers use ozone. You don't want ozone, so avoid any that create ozone. But these hydrogen peroxide units do not create ozone.
So ozone's a good disinfectant, but you don't want to inhale it.
You don't, correct. You don't want it in your house, and you don't want to inhale it, correct. And I wanted to spin off just another comment from Felicia from your sister's experience. Some of my colleagues in the Air Force have come up with a lifestyle medicine. You know, how do you, besides cleaning the air indoors, how do you make yourself as healthy as possible to fight off the viral infection? And they've come up with something they call personal protective nutrition, PPN, and personal protective lifestyle, PPL, to be added to your personal protective equipment. And they have made a and I'm sure this relates to your sister's, Korean herbalist treatment that she's getting. A lot of these healthy living strategies, eating as healthy a diet as possible, getting enough sleep, avoiding stress as much as you can, keeping a proper body weight and getting exercise, they keep you in the healthiest possible situation to deal with the virus. They improve your immune response. And so it's important to try, while you're all stressed about everything else, try to keep yourself as healthy as you can. Don't forget to go for a walk. Don't forget to eat healthy during this time, because it really does make a difference, to the point where this is being provided as education to active duty military as a very significant part of how to protect themselves right now.
Okay, well, we are pretty much at the end of this hour. Jane, this has been a fascinating and unbelievably useful conversation. We thank you so much for joining us. I hope that this was the beginning of a beautiful friendship, where we can continue to follow up on some of these really important concepts that have come out of this discussion. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for asking me. And if people want to email me questions, I'm glad to continue the dialogue offline after this. I'm really happy to research answers if I don't know them. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank
What's
you
your email
so
address?
much, Jane. This is so informative. I agree. I could listen to you for hours. Thank you.
Should I put my email in the chat, or Robin, can you share it? Or
That'd be terrific. And while you're doing that, I'm going to turn it back. Where is Bert?
I'm here.
Oh, okay, there you go. You went to a different box in the Brady Bunch. So I'm going to turn it back over to Bert to wrap us up.
Well, Jane, I echo Robin's and Jen's thank yous for this. This has been highly informative, a little bit scary, more than a little bit, and
it's very scary.
yeah. But I think that having good information going forward, as opposed to just swimming in a sea of uncertainty, is something that we really need going forward. And I look forward to seeing what sort of possible collaborations that this might produce. So again, thank you so much for doing this. Robin, thank you for your excellent moderating capabilities. Jen, thank you for running the chat. And thanks to all of you for being here today. Hope to see you at a future Coffee Q&A or First Friday event. If you have any other questions about us at the Tech Council, or you have a connection we have made, please feel free to reach out to me or one of our board members. So that's it for now. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.